throne room, so I just decided to do it via call instead.
That's no problem. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I just need to turn my overall sound down just a little bit so that way it doesn't blow out my eardrums. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you sound fine.
Okay, good. So, in preparation for this discussion, I was like watching a little bit of the two interviews that you were in to kind of like get an idea as to exactly what your belief system is, exactly what you're about, or at least to kind of have an idea as to, um, I guess, just an idea of who you are. I didn't
All
really,
right.
I didn't really get that far in either discussion. I kind of like got like through like 12 minutes of the one with the Antinatalism podcast and maybe about 10 minutes of the other one. So it's they're pretty long. One's like 4 hours. So I figured maybe like we could go more deeper into detail about what you wanted to cover with me.
Yeah, no problem at all. I just appreciate that you at least took some of the time to actually like try to investigate and everything. But long story short, I used to run a YouTube channel called Seven of Swords. Um, I've since then killed the channel and have tried to kind of distance myself a little bit from that. But what I kind of tried to focus on with that channel would be like intersections between like antinatalism, technology, and kind of like my findings throughout the internet manosphere going back to about 2017. Um, for several reasons. Maybe we can get into further on during this discussion. I pretty much am trying to distance myself from online antinatalism, and I'm focusing on other things in my life right now. But I still consider myself to be antinatalist, even though uh, my experiences with online antinatalism were pretty horrible. But yeah, I hope that's kind of just like a gist of what Seven of Swords is or was. And if you want to know more, you could watch those videos again, or we'll find out more during this discussion. So thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure because I'm always trying to communicate with people. I'm always like interested in doing discussions like these. I don't know how familiar you are with my YouTube, BitChute, and MGTOW channels. Like it's all basically the same channel. I just exist on different platforms, so that way if YouTube ever decides to purge me for Wrongthink or something along those lines, then the other two channels act as backups. Are you familiar with who I am, or do I need to, or should I introduce myself?
I think I found out about your channel through MGTOW.tv, and I think I followed some links and I found your Twitter and your YouTube. But I take it that you look at politics and like sexual relations through like a through kind of like an MRA lens, but I don't know. It's Gynocentrism watch, so I assume that you take it from that sort of perspective, I guess. But even other people throughout the Manosphere aren't necessarily MRAs just because they use the term Gynocentrism. So perhaps you could like perhaps introduce yourself, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So, Gynocentrism Watch. Looking back, I've said this in my discussion with Red Bonaparte in my video that I called "Base Discussion with a Marxist," or I made the title of that video like three different titles depending on what platform that I put it on, as kind of like a PR move. So, Gynocentrism Watch. Basically, I am an MRA. I originally got affiliated with the MGTOW sphere because I had a very MGTOW-esque mindset when I was younger. And the way I found out about MGTOW is I was watching TJ Kirk on Joe Rogan's show. And TJ Kirk was actually disparaging and mocking MRAs and MGTOW. And that was how I actually found out about it. And then, like, after he mentioned it, I looked into these communities. And MGTOW kind of appealed to me more for their premise, and also because I was kind of going through a misogynistic phase, more or less. But the one thing about MGTOW that I didn't like from the beginning was their individualistic approach and their contempt for activism. It's like, we don't care about activism. We don't care about, changing society for the better because I'm just going to go out. I'm going to go my own way. I'm going to be like Ted Kaczynski, hiding out in a log cabin in the woods with my AR-15, and I'm going to destroy society by like just not paying taxes or some dumb crap like that. And I'm someone who doesn't believe in great man theory, so I think that going Galt stuff is a lot of BS. I'm not against people, living their lives the way they want to. Like, the reason why MGTOW, if I disparaged the concept of libertarianism, then MGTOW would have never appealed to me from the beginning. But the reason why I started shifting towards the men's rights kind of communities, actually it's not even the men's rights communities. The reason why I adopted more of a MRA kind of aesthetic, because I consider myself to be more of an MRA because I believe in activism, and I don't believe a single individual can change society. I believe that large masses of people can. I don't think that if you are one individual, you go into politics, that you're going to manage to change the direction of a country with millions of people in it. Like, you need a lot of people with you on your side. Because, like, Donald Trump, some people look at Trump as a success story where he, took over the United States, and he single-handedly, like, changed the direction of the Republican Party. The way I see it, they're the kind of people that Trump appealed to were always there. But what Trump did was he acted like a lightning rod that helped empower that energy that was already there. It's just that before him, neocons were always in power. But to get back to the point is that I call myself Gynocentrism Watch because fighting against Gynocentrism is like the main thing that I do. But now looking back, I realized that through my experiences, a lot of people see my YouTube name and they assume that I'm like a tradcon. And I repeatedly have to dispel that myth because I'm not. I'm an egalitarian at heart. And anybody that talks to me personally for long enough will find that out. But it's a constant annoyance. And shoot, I forgot what else I was going to say. It'll probably come back to me. Shoot.
All right, that's
yeah,
that's awesome.
That'll be for now.
Yeah, I mean, the whole MRA versus MGTOW versus POA versus Incel versus tradcon thing, that's just a very old discussion. Like I said, like, I've been in this area since like 2017, and I don't think that either one of those sides have necessarily like given the silver bullet to the other side to make it look like the other one is more irrational than the other. So for me, like, I just take what I can from everybody, and whatever makes sense with me, I roll with it. And I think it's important that MRAs are doing work to look at how the state functions, to look at how other institutions function, especially with regards to politics, and to point out those ways in which it's not going to be in favor of men living their lives. But I also think that MGTOW has a point too when suggesting that, like, it could be the case that collectives or collectivities could change society. But until we have that sort of political moment, the best that we can do is this sort of individualism. But like, I'm heavily influenced by like Turd Flinging Monkey, right? So he considered MGTOW as like a survival strategy. And that's kind of how I think about it. I think about it like with the same mindset as like a mercenary. You're there pretty much for your own interests, and your interests might rub up against other people. And what I think that MGTOW and MRAs have the biggest problem with each other about is there's like a kind of an undertone of MRAs using shame against men, even though it might not necessarily be the case that like what the MRA might want could be politically feasible. But I don't think that means that we should totally ignore MRAs. I think MGTOW and MRAs have like some very overlapping interests, especially with regards to marriage and what men are supposed to do in kind of like a post-marriage society. And like two people that I've kind of read or looked at would be like F. Roger Devlin and what's his name, Baskerville, that's his last name, and how they've looked at the marriage considerations involving the state and how family court is organized and how gynocentrism affects men's lives with regards to like child support and alimony and who initiates divorce most often. I really don't think MGTOW and MRA should be fighting this whole like, you shouldn't try to shame me. No, you need to be shamed into this because it's going to make society better. When like, it might be more fruitful if they both say, you know what, you have your points, I have mine. We can still perhaps agree on certain things and still have productive discussion. I don't know if that's useful at all, but that's kind of how I think of it.
Okay, well, I can't speak for the things that other MRAs say, and this is this is the reason why I try to like make a name for myself instead of like hitch myself to other MRAs or like other MGTOW back when I was associated with the MGTOW community, is because I hate needing to defend things that other people say because other people make arguments that I would not make. Like some people say that, oh, there's MRAs that, you know, disparage MGTOWs for not marrying or having kids, and then they'll bring up like Stefan Molyneux, who's not as much of an MRA as he is a white supremacist, because before he got banned off of Twitter, he was making overtly white supremacist comments. So it's like, I would say, like, if anyone's going to criticize me for, you know, criticizing MGTOW, then they should just criticize me directly or stuff that I've said. So it's like, I call myself a men's rights activist because I feel like that generally describes the activism or political advocacy that I care about more than every other political topic that I talk about on my channel. Because I do use my political channel to talk about any controversial topic, whether it's political or that one time that I talked about Robert Bever, which admittedly is the video so far that has been the source of most of my viewers and views. Although I'm slowly gaining like an audience for political content, but the going's very slow because I can't seem to figure out what the golden ticket is. But anyway, back on topic. So with MGTOW, the things that I've criticized, there were a couple things that I criticized MGTOW for. One was the opposition or contempt towards political activism. The premise of MGTOW I'm not really opposed to, like self-preservation, stuff of libertarianism and self-preservation are things that I'm sympathetic. Even now I'm sympathetic towards MGTOW, but the reason why I wanted to get away from their communities is in each one there was contempt for nonconformity. And what I mean by this is there was a website called MGTOW.com, which was an old forum that's now the website doesn't exist anymore, but it was an old timer in the MGTOW community. This website was run by a guy named Keymaster. I don't know what his real name is, but that was his alias, and he liked using Han Solo and Indiana Jones avatars for his website, which I found to be highly ironic considering that he doesn't like women at all. Now, there was a guy on his website that came up with an idea, and he's probably wrong, but the reaction to this idea was the thing that made me it wasn't just on this website. He said, like, do you think it would be useful to castrate yourself in order to make it so that you can't get sperm jacked or something along those lines? And I don't think that this guy is necessarily correct, but the reaction by the other people on that website, including Keymaster himself, who not just jeered at him, but also banned him from the website for making that suggestion. They didn't explain why he was wrong. They didn't like try to be polite about it at all. They just started insulting him, and then they banned him. And it wasn't just on that particular website. It was also on both MGTOW subreddits that I saw this like behavior. So if you made a suggestion that was unpopular, if you had an idea that was unpopular, because I posted on there suggesting that wouldn't it be useful for us to create like communities the way the political lesbians did, because they created like a whole secret society where they live out in the woods, and it's like that would be useful to fight against society if for the going goal idea. It's like, why can't we do something similar to that? And the other MGTOWs like collectively dogpiled on me. But then when you had people on, say, MGTOW.com who were posting, I mean, not MGTOW.com, MGTOW.tv, that were posting overtly racist content, you know, if you criticize the racism, they say, hey, you shouldn't be criticizing that because they have freedom of speech. By the way, I have a feeling that the guy that runs the MGTOW.tv website removed my video criticizing people posting racist stuff in MGTOW communities, because I have that video on YouTube and BitChute, but for some reason it's suddenly no longer on MGTOW.tv, and I know for a fact that I did not remove that video because I have no motivation to, because there was a good discussion in the comments section. So I have a feeling somebody that is in charge on the MGTOW.tv website didn't like that video and had it removed. And it was just this hypocrisy in the MGTOW community that made me just, was the thing that made me want to move away from it. And I'm like, you know something, instead of just hitching myself to other people, I'm going to be myself. I'm just going to be by myself. And if people agree with me, then they can come and follow me. Because every time I hitch myself to other people, every time I attach myself to a social influencer who's in politics, or a political influencer rather, I always just get depressed or frustrated because they're always going to disappoint me. And it's not to say that like you should completely disassociate with someone or a community just because every now and then they have like odious takes, but if it's like taking a toll on your own well-being, like you're in it's almost like you're in an abusive relationship with that online influencer or that community, then you just need to cut yourself off. And that's what I did. So I kind of just am myself. I post my opinions, but I consider myself to be a men's rights activist because that's what most closely resembles my politics. That's what I care about more than everything else. Because I talk about other political issues, but stuff like communism, which I occasionally talk about, I haven't really decided how I truly feel on that topic. I'm kind of on the fence. But men's rights, even when I was a child, before I learned about the MRA community and the MGTOW community, even prior to 2012, I was still basically an MRA at heart.
Yeah, I can understand that. Like there were definitely times when I was on, and I used to be a moderator for the Antinatalism subreddit for about 3 months, and my experiences with that subreddit were quite dreadful, and that's partially why I want to distance myself from online antinatalism. Yeah, like totally distancing yourself from that sort of disgusting atmosphere can be pretty beneficial. But like with my experience with MGTOW.tv, I pretty much just go there to watch. I watch RT, which is like Russia Today, right? And I watch Stardust and like Sandman and maybe like one or two other MGTOW content producers, but I don't really participate in the comments. I don't know about who owns the site or anything. I just go there pretty much to consume. But yeah, MGTOW themselves have even criticized the notion of what an online community even is, and what would it mean to have a quote unquote MGTOW community, and why would they not go out like the second wave feminists, like you mentioned, during like the 70s or whatever, and make their little communes or whatever. I think a part of that just has to deal with men and women. Of course, I do take a biological stance that there are differences in sociality for biological reasons between men and women. As a political strategy, women might be more in favor toward that sort of lesbianism as like an unrestrained sexual strategy, even though it wouldn't really involve being impregnated by men unless it's through in vitro fertilization or whatever. But men, I think there's something about men that like at least these men in particular, they like their solitude. like I think there's like a Blade Runner syndrome kind of happening that the internet is magnifying, and I think some men actually do like that. And if you're the perspective if you're from the perspective of from an MRA, you're not going to like that because, in a sense, that's a means of like political apathy or political inaction. When you would think that these men should be out there doing something, but if you're already involved with MGTOW in that sense, you've already done the math, and you would think that the MRA is trying to set you up for some sort of a trap or a political waste of time, when you might be better off just saving your money and making your money and doing whatever MGTOW want to do, whether that's starting a business or like geomaxing or whatever it is. So, but like I said, like I think that they should work together, because if we're supposed to be convinced that gynocentrism is an overall cultural political force and it's within the means of the government and other institutions, if you want to go your own way, you might hit some roadblocks. You're going to ask some questions like, why is this here? And then you'd have to investigate, and the MRAs might have their theories about that.
So when it comes to the good that both men going their own way and men's rights activists contribute, I think that even now we both kind of do that, and we've been doing that over the past 9 years. How long has it been? Since like 2013-ish, I guess. I think 2014 to 2016 was kind of like the heyday of MGTOW and MRAs, and even though we didn't always see eye to eye, we both kind of had our own departments where we both did good work, even though we were kind of like operating in different spheres. So with people like me, my criticism of like MGTOW, like the not getting politically involved and going your own way, it's not like I'm not like a Fed who's trying to lure them into a trap, because federal government's not gonna pay me to do that shit. Nah, but for real, it's mostly, some of it stems from kind of an anxiety, because the feminists and the female supremacists and the gynocentrists, they are very good at politically organizing. They are very good at taking power, because if you want to take power in a society, you got to do it en masse. You need to get as many of your people as possible, as many people on your side as possible, to like take power in a given region, and you got to do it en masse. If you just go in there by yourself and hope to sneak in there and make positive change, you're gonna fail, because like no matter what political office you run for, is even something as small and insignificant as like member of county committee, which I'm a member of a county committee, people are gonna know who you are, and there's no sneaking in, because even at such a lowly office like that, you know, your personal information is gonna be on the internet, because you know the public officials have access to it. So I can understand why MGTOW would probably not want to go down that route. And on the one hand, I understand that they don't like the idea of you got to take one for the team, but at the same time, like we can't just like sit on our hands and let the female supremacists take power in this country, because if we do that, then who's going to oppose them? Like I want MRAs and as many people as MRAs can influence to get to basically band together. If we can like take power in like at least one state or multiple states, if preferably, if we could organize and then take power by like running for offices, and then we could have positive change that way, because Trump supporters have been very effective at doing it. Social Democrats very effective at doing it. White nationalists and white supremacists and alt-righters, they've managed to do it in the GOP, and they've been very impressive. And you know, MRAs, it's like what we're marching out in the streets with like signs and like white suits with like red paint splotched on the crotch, like what Paul Elam did. It's like, come on, guys. It's like when like libtards call us fascists, so it's almost like a compliment, because like we would be lucky if we can get any shit done. The most we got done was like lawsuits that Mark Angelucci filed where he succeeded, and like that's about it.
Yeah, I understand that sort of frustration because like TFM has even noted like the MRA project has had 100 years and they haven't had anything done. So he says, well, the default should be MGTOW because of that. And I think that some of this discourse, it becomes proto-accelerationist, if not at least implying a sort of accelerationism. So I think that from these gender problems, we're going to see more intensified political polarization. We're going to see more and more different types of groups trying to have power. And I'm not exactly sure what that's going to look like, because we know the gynocrats are mostly going, well, there's left-wing and right-wing gynocrats if you believe like TFM's sort of political theory. You have like right-wing gynocrats, which would be more like tradcons, and you have the left-wing ones, which would be more like Marxist feminists, right? And then the goal of MGTOW is to try to avoid both of those options. And I think what the MRA wants is he wants some sort of a balance there, but it's not exactly obvious when and how to achieve that sort of a balance.
Well,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, you can continue.
Do you know what my goal is?
I'd like to hear it.
My goal is to get MRAs to what I want ideally would be if we have enough MRAs, then what we could do is we could run for office in both the Democrat and Republican parties, and we won't like step on the toes on like the issues that people care the most about, as long as it's not gynocentric. And it's like, we'll give you everything you guys want, but you can't be gynocentric, and we're gonna be men's rights activists. What I want is for men's rights to be a third rail political position, where being like female supremacist, gynocentric, or whatever the case may be, is a death sentence to your political success. Now, right now, the Republican Party has gynocentrists and the Democrat Party has gynocentrists. And the thing is, we can beat these people. We just need more of us to take power. Because, like, in the county that I live in, like the entire town that I live in, it's controlled by Trumpsters. But the rest of the county is, like, moderates. It's like I gotta give credit to the Trumpsters, because it's like they are very good at organizing. They're very good at, recruiting people. And MRAs, it's like, I hope we can get to that point. Because my goal is to compromise both main political parties, so that way MRAs basically control both main political parties. And I have what I think is a winning strategy. And I don't believe in great man theory. I don't think I can do this by myself. I don't think I can infiltrate an entire political party and take it over and then turn it MRA like Palpatine in Star Wars. It would be cool if I could do that, but just looking through history, like most dictators and political leaders, or even not dictators, could be presidents, that achieved major change, they had a lot of people behind them that allowed that to happen. Even when you look at dictatorships, this is a bit of a tangent, but I'll try to wrap it up as best as I can. Even dictators have people that keep them in power. I don't think that dictatorship actually exists. Even dictatorships are always oligarchies of one form or another. It's just that dictatorship and democracy just make it an easy dichotomy, when in reality, I think that almost every government's an oligarchy of some sort. Now, back to the other thing that you were talking about. You mentioned like a number of different topics, and I want to get to all of them. You mentioned turd flinging monkey, and that are you a biological determinist?
No, actually. When we think about when I think about the free will versus determinism debate, I'm actually a compatibilist.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of like antinatalists are determinists. But
Really?
I find there to be problems with determinism and libertarian free will also that prevent me from accepting both. So the only other option to me would be compatibilism. So to me
Okay.
that makes sense.
Okay. So the thing is I don't know what you believe now. Are you still an antinatalist? Because the two videos that you showed me show you seeming to be an antinatalist.
Yes, I'm still antinatalist. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know a whole lot about the antinatalist community, but from like the snippets that I've seen, it's kind of like it's an it's a philosophy similar to that of men going their own way, or at least the premise behind men going their own way. And that is like that you would either like you believe that people shouldn't be having kids or that they should be allowed to choose to not have kids. And basically my position is that I have nothing wrong with it unless there's something that you've seen or because I've not hung around any natalist communities, so it could chances are you know things that I don't know about what's going on.
Well, you're probably going to get a rather one-sided response with my experiences with the antinatalism community. As with any community online, you're going to have a mixed bag. You're going to have your awesome people and you're going to have your lynch mobs, right? So
That was my experience with MGTOW.
yeah, I get it. But for me, like when I first started getting into antinatalism, I think it might have been a little bit after I was kind of exposed to MGTOW. But I was just really into philosophy because that's like what I went to school for and everything. And I graduated with a philosophy degree. And I just wanted to look into what are some like really radical positions. And I think I heard The Amazing Atheist talk about Inmindum one time, and I started watching some Inmindum videos. And then I started looking into it more and more, and I was exposed to like Vegan Antinatalist, which he was a YouTuber. I don't think he's really around anymore. And then I found out about Forever Wolf Films or Amanda Sukanik. She's really cool. She runs like the podcast with Mark and everyone. They know me. They're really kind and nice people. I have nothing bad to say about them at all. However, when you're in a certain position on an online forum like Reddit or whatever, and there are a lot of people that are convinced that antinatalism is anti-patriarchy, therefore it's feminist. And if you are anything like me, I'm adjacent to MRAs, MGTOW, Incel, PUA, just the Manosphere in general. They consider me a misogynist, just flat out. It doesn't really matter. So if you have me in a position of being a moderator for a sub with over 150,000 people, and plenty of them are, for lack of a better term, they're gynocentric, they're misandrist. This is my experience on the subreddit. And they already don't like you. They want to call you an incel and all this stuff, and even perhaps try to dox you. You're going to have a bad experience, and it's going to make your experience of that community pretty bad, pretty tarnished. Even though the moderation team itself that I was a part of for 3 months, they were fantastic people. They were very nice. They wanted rules. They wanted to change the atmosphere of the Reddit to make it more welcoming. But I don't know what has happened since my leaving. And frankly, I don't want to know. But it was largely I called it gynocratic rot. It was very much in favor of some means of Marxist feminism, if not xenofeminism. And it would be it was just a feminism that didn't like men on this side of the internet, that would consider us to be misogynist. Yet I'm not exactly sure misogyny even exists. I think there's misandry, but like what is misogyny exactly? Like,
So
I don't think anybody really hates women. Like, if people hated women, society wouldn't be operating in the way that we're criticizing it. That doesn't make sense to me.
So yeah, they use the word misogyny usually to refer to like chauvinism. It drives me up the wall because the word misogyny has a meaning. It used to mean the hatred of women, and it's like, okay,
It's a
so
hatred. It's a
so
hatred, resentment, and contempt for women. That's what
so
it's supposed to mean.
so here's the thing: if okay, so if someone thinking that women are inferior or should be like fit into a specific like sex role, if that's misogyny, then what would you call somebody who thinks that women shouldn't be allowed to exist and be sent to extermination camps? Is there a distinction, or are we going to call that the same exact thing? Because they're not the same exact thing. It's just that the latter position is usually looked at as being insane, and the prior one is an established, accepted political position that has ruled the world for thousands of years.
Yes, I think that under in more radical terms, like through industrialization and how certain technologies have allowed for women to work and maintain their subsistence without necessarily having to marry, it allows for a certain type of reproductive and like intellectual freedom that women can enjoy. And when they view a means of a patriarchal condition like before industrialization, they view that as a threat, as a means of taking away what they've been able to enjoy ever since, like, I don't know, the mid 18th century or late 17th century, whenever you want to say industrialization, I guess, occurred.
Okay, well, wait, when you say 18th century, you're referring to the 1700s, right?
Yeah, I guess you could.
Because some people get this wrong. 17th century refers to the 1600s, 18th century refers to the I mean, wait. 17th century is 1600s, 18th century is 1900s. The reason is because zero AD, or yeah, I think it's AD, up until 100 AD, that was the first century. So
Yeah.
the anyway, I kind of wanted to address just your experience with the antinatalism community, because I have a comparison to draw to it with the communities I've been in. Before I got with like the MGTOW and before I got with the Manosphere communities, I was sort of like a liberal feminist almost. And the reason why I started like moving away from that was because I had a similar experience to you. Now I was a liberal, and my interpretation is that liberals and democratic politicians, we were like the good guys, and that Republicans and right wingers in general were these like comic book villains, and a lot of them are, but I didn't see the hypocrisy within the left at the time. And when that became more apparent between 2014 and 2016, which I know are the GamerGate years, but my whole experience during that time, seeing and experiencing liberal hypocrisy, feminist hypocrisy, anti-male female supremacy, like all that shifted me towards the right. As silly as it sounds, I used to watch the Young Turks, and I was a fan of them for a time, but I started seeing a lot of lemons out of them, and finally I think that their video covering the tragedy of Christina Grimmie getting murdered and using it as an excuse to say, hey, we should start restricting the Second Amendment. It's like, that was kind of like the last straw. And I think I probably did shift towards the right a little bit, but just seeing the hypocrisy within the left pushed me away from that community. And then with MGTOW, then you had the MGTOW main subreddit. This is kind of more simple. This is more similar to your experience. When I was in the MGTOW subreddit, I've read posts. Actually, it was in the MGTOW 2 subreddit, because in the MGTOW main subreddit, they actually banned me back in like, I think it was 2018 when they banned me, and they wouldn't tell me why. And then what happened is people in the MGTOW 2 subreddit said that after Elliot Rodger did that mass shooting in California back in 2014, suddenly there was like a massive influx of people coming in, because the Incel subreddit got banned shortly after that. And then all of a sudden, the MGTOW subreddit suddenly got a bunch of new users. And all of a sudden, people that were actually, adherents to the MGTOW philosophy suddenly started getting banned, and then you started seeing posts on the MGTOW main MGTOW subreddit saying things like, "Yeah, and Stacy's gonna have continue fucking Chad Thundercock instead of me," and I'm like, why would that be a problem if you're MGTOW? And then I get banned, and I tried like talking to the people that ran the MGTOW subreddit, "Hey, why'd you ban me?" And they wouldn't tell me why. They wouldn't even say in their reason for banning me why they would ban me. And it just seemed like incels hijacked the MGTOW main subreddit. And then in the MGTOW community, for a while, white supremacists were shitting on men going their own way. So they were saying, like, "You're killing off the white race." But then Andrew Anglin starts going MGTOW, and then he seemed to get the idea that if you want to destroy MGTOW, what you got to do is you got to co-opt it. Because Andrew Anglin tried saying that Steven Crowder, like, I think he didn't like Steven Crowder, so he said, "Hey, Steven Crowder did an interview with me, White Power with Crowder." And it looked like he was trying to derail Steven Crowder because he knows that neo-Nazis are toxic. And ultimately, it was Richard Spencer that saved Steven Crowder's ass by saying that, Steven Crowder's just he's an off-the-shelf conservative. He's not dangerous. And then all of a sudden, I start seeing neo-Nazis and white supremacists in MGTOW. And I didn't want to be associated with that. So then I start slowly distancing myself from MGTOW to some degree. But I kept my MGTOW.tv account only because it's another website that I can kind of use as a backup to keep videos of mine on. So if like YouTube goes on a female supremacist wrongthink purging spree, then I'll have, it's just like an extra layer of protection where it's like, hey, I have my legacy will still exist on at least one website. I also have a BitChute account, and the people that run BitChute are not very trigger happy when it comes to deleting stuff. So, or at least it doesn't seem to be that way, because I see leftists on BitChute, believe it or not. So that's just another place that I could post my videos. Of all the three websites, I seem to get the fewest amount of views on there, but that's slowly changing. MGTOW is currently MGTOW.tv is currently the website I get the least amount of views on, but I don't know how my relationship is with the guy that runs the MGTOW.tv website, whose username is Alpha Male Lifestyle. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but you know, I'm hoping that I didn't piss him off when I criticized his video that compared black men to apes.
All right. Like I said, like I can't really comment on any of that. I'm not personally invested in changing those aspects of the site. I just strictly consume, kind of like YouTube. YouTube has all sorts of videos that I don't like, but I'm only there for what I do like. So
you're good at not like stepping on. You seem to be good at not stepping on people's toes, and that's
no,
like
I've stepped on people's toes, but like I just don't see how I need to make a position on that, because it doesn't really affect me. Unless the site gets shut down or something. But other than that, like the people are still going to keep using it and making the content, and I'm still going to keep watching it.
I mean, it's hard. Sometimes I have a hard time resisting like criticizing it. Like, what am I supposed to just like look the other way? So I criticized stuff like that, and it probably like threatened my relationship with the guy that runs that website. But it's like, look, if you're gonna say like, well, we are individualists and we could say whatever we want. So it's like, okay, well, if you're allowed to say racist stuff, then why can't I criticize your racism? Just seemed like hypocrisy, that because people have accused MGTOW of being racist before then, and it just seemed like their criticism, like feminist criticism of MGTOW, saying they're racist, just came out of their ass. But then I
honestly think. I'm sorry, you can continue.
But then, like, I see, like, people in the men going their own way community start posting racist stuff, and I'm just like, I'm trying to, like, steelman these people, and it's like they're, like, taking a sniper rifle and using it to shoot themselves in the foot. Like, no, the feminists are right about us being racist, but if you criticize us for posting this stuff, then we'll excommunicate you. The worst they've done was I got banned from the men going their own way subreddit, and that video of me criticizing them got deleted off of the MGTOW.tv website. But I didn't want to go too deep into that. a vice of mine is I have a bad habit of going into tangents, and I need to be corralled back to the topic at hand. So I
Oh no,
apologize for that.
that's fine. But
Uh,
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say, I think a lot of terms that are politically loaded, such as you're a racist, a misogynist, a sexist, a homophobe, whatever. I think a lot of those, how I think of it, they're prove me not words. That's how I think of it. And what I mean by that is the person labels you that, and then in order to even get back to a modicum of their good graces with them, they want you to prove that you're not what they labeled you as. And to me, I think it's a way of just noting who's your political enemy and who isn't. And to me, because I really only care about myself and what I can do while I'm on this planet, I don't think I need to really waste my time with a bunch of people that are already my enemy if they have already decided that I am theirs. So as long as the person isn't like trying to interfere with me living my life and what I need to do in order to suffer less because I was born here for that. I mean, you can just criticize all you want on the internet. Like, I'm pro free speech, but like, have you heard of like the whole Kiwi Farms debacle?
I have an account. I have a account on Kiwi Farms that I use to lurk on there. Um, I have. It's not tied. It's not doesn't have the same username as any of my other political, as any of my other aliases. So I'm not gonna say what it is because I don't want to dox myself because you know. But I am familiar with Kiwi Farms. I don't know. I know that their website has been down for a couple weeks. I don't know what the occasion this time is. They're always getting themselves in trouble because there are a lot of people on there that like to dox people. There's a lot of people on Kiwi Farms that are raging transphobes who will go after you if you criticize their deity and goddess, J.K. Rowling. So I wouldn't be surprised that they got themselves in hot water this time again.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure who to blame politically for what happens on Kiwi Farms with regards to doxing, because to me that's a cyber weapon that both sides use against each other. And if someone already thinks of you as their enemy and there's nothing you can do but type away on your keyboard, they if they want to dox you, they could, depending upon how much information you've put out.
Oh yeah.
But with my experience with antinatalism, like I'm not even sure. It was already politically fractured, even within what was going on there. You had libertarians, you had communists, you had feminists, there was some MRAs, some MGTOW. It wasn't that many. You have liberals, you have some, like, I guess you could say dissident right defeated conservatives that pretty much have said society's so bad we probably shouldn't be reproducing. I've seen many different types of things, and I've seen people say that the antinatalism subreddit is the incels of subreddit or the incels of philosophy. Yet I had like an entire mob of people after me calling me an incel. So it's like, am I the most incel of the incels or something? I don't get it. And there were some people that tried to dox me. The Kiwi Farms site, I think, has been under. I think Cloudflare, the one that hosted it, like dropped it because of the whole Keffals debacle. I don't know if you've heard about that.
I know a little bit about it because, like, even though I think that Vosh isn't really a force of good, in politics, mainly because I realized that he's dishonest after I had a discussion with him on his channel. He made a video talking about Keffals, and I didn't really watch that video, but I saw like some posts on the internet basically saying that Keffals helped children transition, and then Kiwi Farms, given that they're raging transphobes, that they basically doxed her and helped the FBI go after her or something. I don't know too much about it, but a lot of tech companies really don't like people that are transphobes or against progressive politics. So I'm not too surprised if Kiwi Farms basically got themselves deplatformed because many, if not most, of the users on there, including, I believe, the guy that runs it, probably are transphobes who are doxing people. And it's like, then they get their asses handed to them because they decided to do shit that the company that hosted them didn't like. It's kind of like the time when Discus deplatformed Return of Kings. I think that's what happened. I mean, they were using the Discus platform, and then all of a sudden, Roosh V in 2018 says that he's discontinuing the Return of Kings website. He stated that he said the reason was because they said everything that they needed to say, and they just don't need to keep it running anymore. But Roosh V is a kind of guy that knows how to do like PR moves anytime he needs to have like a good PR strategy. So I can't trust anything that he said. I've read other posts saying that the reason why Return of Kings got deplatformed off the internet was because Discus was tired of platforming them, kind of like how GoDaddy is another one where they stopped platforming Rightpedia, which was like a neo-Nazi website where you had a lot of neo-Nazis that were pedophiles on there. So Kiwi Farms getting in trouble because like Kiwi Farms has been getting in trouble for years where their website's been like down constantly. So it's like they can't really surprise me anymore. There's a lot of odious people on that website. Not everybody on there is bad. I've had good experiences and conversations with people on Kiwi Farms. There are decent people on there, but you're going to see the dredges of humanity on there too.
Indeed, indeed. And where I think this becomes accelerationist is where certain entities start becoming like more alienated and using technology more for their own political voice on these platforms. And what Keffals did was, I guess that she like was able to convince a wide number or whoever owns Cloudflare or whatever to just to get rid of it. I'm not sure how I feel about that, having been a person almost in a similar position where I could have gotten doxxed or whatever, but I'm also in favor of free speech. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure what to do about that. And I'm not 110% convinced that like the entirety of Kiwi Farms is just only the transphobes. There's many different types of people on Kiwi Farms.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree that it's pretty scary that somebody like Keffals could like single-handedly like tell like a website like CloudShare, I decree that you need to take these people down. But Kiwi Farms also was doing a lot of morally questionable stuff, and I've heard that some users of Kiwi Farms were able to blackmail Chris Chan, who is a pretty cringy person, but at the same time, Kiwi Farms is like particularly not. It's a website where particularly odious people frequent, so it's like, how would CloudShare specifically target the bad eggs without going after the entire website? I don't know if they have the ability to do that. They may not have a scalpel. They probably just have a sledgehammer.
Yeah, it's a very hard thing to note, and you can't
do a surgical strike with a nuclear missile.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think this just goes like, I don't know if you've read like or seen any videos on, heard of Nick Land. Have you heard of him?
I think I've heard the name Nick Land, but I have no clue who that is.
So he's a philosopher from like England, and he's been pretty influential on how I think about economics and technology and everything. And I think he made this distinction between like hot and cold collectivities. And those are like those really hot collectivities associating with themselves on the internet and using those means of coercion like doxing or whatever else in order to have their way. But for whatever reason, like, if you ask each side who does the doxing the most, each side will say that the other one does. Like, if you ask leftists who's doing the doxing, oh, it's the alt-right Nazis. If you ask someone that's on the right who does the doxing, oh, it's the Antifa communists. They're the ones doing the doxing. So neither side can really agree on who does the doxing, and that's why I'm in such a weird position, because the people that may want to come after me, it wouldn't have been, they wouldn't have been transphobes, because antinatalism, at least politically, most of antinatalism, from how I moderated it and saw, was pro-trans, but it was very feminist and very gynocentric. Mm-hmm. Yet they wanted to come after me. So, yeah.
Well, I'd like to add my 2 cents on this. It's like I had this in my discussion with this one guy in the communist sphere, because in case you didn't know, I was from like around like April up until July, I was hanging around communist communities. And there was this one guy I encountered, Red Bonaparte, who wanted to do a discussion like this with me. And when we did this discussion, it was like either the day after or a couple days after the Supreme Court decision that struck down Roe v. Wade. And shoot, what were we talking about? Oh yeah. And he kind of took a more pro-life position, where I was basically I'm pro-choice. And the reason why is because if abortion rights go away, then contraception is next on the chopping block. Now I don't want to sound pretentious with the way this comes out, but it's probably just gonna. I consider myself perceptive enough to see that reproductive rights are a package deal. You take away abortion, contraceptives such as condoms, spermicides, stuff of that nature, that goes with it. Because the people that want to get rid of abortion don't want people to have reproductive rights. They think that you shouldn't be able to masturbate or anything like that. You should only be allowed to have sex in the context of having some sex with the opposite sex, only for the purpose of reproduction. And that would be like the people that want to ban abortion. That's their position. And their main opponent are people that think that the people that want to ban abortion are male supremacists who want to have reproductive rights for themselves. So the feminist response is, or the feminazi response is, well, how about we make it so that you're not allowed to jack off? Well, if you ejaculate, then you're killing a lot of sperm, so we're going to make it so that you're not allowed to masturbate or something. That was basically Jessica Ferrar's response to like Republicans trying to restrict abortion rights. The thing is, by doing that, these feminists or feminazis are playing right into the hands of the people that want to ban abortion, because the people that want to ban abortion don't want anybody at all to have any reproductive rights. So it frustrates me that this is the discourse, because I feel like both sides are controlled opposition.
Yes, I think plenty of MGTOW, POA, people that are like kind of like that in the Manosphere, I think they recognize that. And I think perhaps 3 questions probably have to be addressed, namely, like, let's say I don't know how much into the sexual marketplace theory you might buy into, but I pretty much think that's how human relationships are forming, at least in the West, post-industrialized countries. There's a sexual marketplace. You'll either be very desirable or you pretty much won't be. And even then, if there is some sort of mating, people are going to have to make concessions and perhaps some trade-offs with potential mate securing. But let's say if you're MGTOW or whatever, or even like Incel, if you're not on the market, why would you care about abortion rights? Because you're not trying to impregnate anybody, and no one wants to try to be impregnated by you, perhaps. It just, to me, it just seems like a really big what about story with regards to gynocratic politics to try to like goad men into being guilty for some reason and having to pick a side when they might not even have to pick one, depending upon what their sexual history may or may not be.
Okay, well, to give you like I do want to answer that question. What my position on the sexual marketplace or hypergamy or all that stuff is. This angers every time I say this. It angers people in the manosphere, but I'm going to say it anyway because I want to answer your question. I just don't really care about it that much because I was in the MGTOW sphere because I looked at the dating game and how fucked it is and how men are discriminated against by the police, by judges, by courts of law, by society in general, and I'm like, why would I run the risk of getting into a bad relationship when I can just live my own life with me at the helm and nobody compromising that? Because if women have more rights than men do, which I'm convinced is the case in the United States, and I have not seen any evidence to prove otherwise, then why would I care if women don't prefer me? Now, I may not be the best person to ask about like the whole incel shit because it's like, okay, well, women will judge you by your height. I'm like 6'1.5", so that's not really a problem that I run into. I don't want to sound like one of those people in the MGTOW communities who declare that they're physically attractive looking, but some people say that I am. I'm not gonna post any proof of this in the interest of not doxing myself, so I'm just gonna ask you to take my word for it. I just don't really buy into the sexual marketplace stuff. I've had this discussion with Red Bonaparte in a previous video, but I'll restate it because I don't expect you to sift through that video, even though I did post timestamps. I feel like personality tends to take precedence, but that's not to say that looks don't matter, because looks do matter. But also, your situation. I do think that this, sexual marketplace has some validity to it. I don't think all of it's bunk, but I just don't really care about it that much.
I get it, and I think that you consider this to be a notion of rights. I'm very skeptical of notions of human rights and what that is and why we have to abide by pieces of paper called constitutions and laws and all this stuff. I'm very skeptical of those notions, but I just wanted to point out that I don't understand why there has to be like a universal empathy for the realm of abortion when the procedure itself or the means of getting one isn't universalizable to everybody on the planet, because they're going to have radically different interests in each other. Like if you're not on the sexual market, to me it seems like you might have better means of putting your energy into something else other than something that's not going to affect your life at all.
Like the main reason why the Roe v. The reason why the Supreme Court strike down of Roe v. Wade made me concerned is not necessarily that I feel that much empathy for women who can't get an abortion. That doesn't mean that I don't care at all. I mean, it's like I don't want like victims of rape to be forced to carry a baby to term if it was like a rape baby or something along those lines. But at the same time, my main concern is just like, okay, now contraception's next on the chopping block. It's like first they went for the communists, but hey, I'm not a communist, so I didn't care. Then they came for the Jews. Then they came for the trade unionists. Then they came for... It's one of those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think that someone could make the argument that might be a slippery slope consideration. And even if they go after contraception and all this stuff, it's like, if you're not on the sexual marketplace, why do you care about contraception or abortion?
Well, what if you get, like... I mean, well, if you are having sex, then you shouldn't have that.
Like, the only other means I think you could care about this would be, like, you have friends that...
Hello?
thing, but let's say you're some guy and you're single and you live by yourself in your apartment, and let's say the women in your life are like pretty much only kin, like they're your aunts or your niece or whatever, and let's say they're all like, I don't know, over the age of when women would normally become pregnant. Like, I just don't see why that guy has to care.
Well,
like, what does he gain?
I mean, I do care about people having the right to contraception, but also, who knows? I might like decide I might have sex one day. Who knows? I mean, just because I'm not doing it right now, just because I don't have a girlfriend right now, it doesn't mean I never will.
Yeah, I get it.
Because I haven't ruled that out completely. It's just that so far in my life, I have not been in a relationship, and I've not met a woman that I trust enough to do all that with. But I don't want to close that door before, I have a chance. But also because...
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I mean, there are the only other thing I can think of is there is the rare possibility. It's like contraception could prevent you from, being forced to have a kid that you can't pay for in the event of sexual assault or some shit like that. I know that sounds kind of like a long shot, but it's like, I'm just in favor of contraception. Gynocentrism, watch the great, have decided that contraception should not go, therefore it shouldn't. When I become Führer of this country, I will decree that. There, that's your reason for it being moral.
Got it. For me, like, as you know, people in the Manosphere have devised several ways to try to deal with certain gynocentric aspects of dating and sexual mate procurement. And that could range anywhere from, like, you buy a sex doll to you move across the planet and partake in, like, sexual tourism or whatever. And those are very interesting debates. And I think every man is going to have their own means of how they're going to secure a plan along those lines. And it comes down to values. Are you familiar with the term axiology?
No, I've never heard of it. I always thought sex tourism was kind of cringe, but it's like, well, if that's what you're into.
So axiology is like a philosophical view or study of value. And I think what a lot of men are after, they want like this objective single point of value with regards to sexual relations, but that's not going to happen because everyone that tries to engage or participate in the sexual marketplace has their own costs and benefits and their own positives and negatives and their own goals for what they actually want out of a potential partner. So
if you put I'm sorry.
So if you're like a tradcon, right? Mm-hmm. And let's say you're like a bodybuilder tradcon bro type of dude and you want the American dream, white picket fence, 2.5 kids or 2.1 kids or whatever, and the wife that makes the apple pies and stuff, you're going to be on a totally different path than the dude that just wants to like spend a few nights with some prostitutes every few months or a week or whatever.
Well, yeah, the reason why those people create those standards is because they would, if they had their way, nobody would be allowed to choose to not be like them. But so the best that they can do is like, just like post online, these are the objective standards every man should consider to be the ideal or strive to be. And if you don't like follow my specific lifestyle choices, then you're inferior. That shit always pissed me off. You saw a lot of like, because I remember seeing like a lot of antinatalist content that was really like geared towards pissing off natalists on like Twitter and shit, where you had people saying like, you're a biological failure if you don't get married and have more kids than you can pay for. It's like they said like, if you enjoy life, you're a biological failure. But if you go into the if you knock a woman up, have kids, and then go into the military, well, you won't be able to see or raise them, and then you can come back and then cry when you meet them. Oh, that's a biological success.
Yeah, there's this huge question that I think a lot of people have been trying to deal with in the antinatalism space, and that's what's the point of human reproduction if humans are not immortal and we're going to go extinct at some future time? What do we mean by biological success if you can look at the history of the planet and 99 point whatever % of biological life forms have went extinct?
I'm gonna
Like,
guess is because that way uh the probably just so that white supremacists can have like a better chance at winning the race war.
it's not just them. Like you kind of noted it. It's a political gamble. It's a political means of having certain narratives in society generate certain affirmative actions. And I don't mean affirmative action in the like we need to pass laws favoring certain. I
No,
mean affirmative.
I know what you meant.
Yeah, like affirmative in the sense like to be against the other, like to assert your own self against the other. Reproduction must be used in this way. Yet they don't want to acknowledge like your little narrative story is going to have an ending where everyone's going to end up dying anyway because we're not immortal. And I know that there are going to be some transhumanists. I forgot to mention I'm also a transhumanist. There are going to be some transhumanists that might disagree with me and saying we can be immortal. You're just a deathist, but I don't think that that's correct because I don't think that we've solved certain problems with like entropy and how cells and how senescence works in our species. Because how I think about it is humans are naturally selected to be mortal. We're not like those little microbes that can live in whatever environment for who knows how long. And it had to be like that in order for certain people to be selected for genetic reasons, so that they can reproduce. I don't know how you can get around that. And the only means of which I think you could technologically do it would be through replacing a lot of your. You'd have to essentially keep replacing what makes you biologically with more advanced types of technology. And we're quite a few ways away from that. And even if that were the case, there are still theories that concern what the end of the universe is supposed to be like, whether that's heat death or the big rip or the big crunch or whatever. So it still begs the question, what is the point of an immortality project? And what does it mean when our reproductive capabilities are not going to secure that project's end goal? And we also have to keep in mind all of these discussions have to be had with regards to the decreasing birth rate among weird countries. You know what like a weird country is, right?
Like Japan?
Weird is an acronym. It's like for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. I think that's the acronym.
Okay, so I was not aware of that.
Yeah, so like every weird country, or like if you think of a Western country, there's a good chance its birth rate is well below replacement, which is 2.1. Japan, you were correct. Japan does have a low birth rate, but so does South Korea. I would consider Japan and South Korea to be almost like weird countries because their birth rates are low and they have everything that I just listed pretty much, except they're not exactly Western because they're in Asia. But that's scaring people economically because we don't know how to deal with it. Because all the projections from like the last century were saying that we're going to have overpopulation, but now all the birth rates are going down, and it looks like there could potentially be like a sandsdemic or an absence of people that could create labor problems down the line in the next few decades.
So here's I've got a lot that I want to say about that. I'm not a transhumanist necessarily, but I think that because you brought up a number of different topics, and I want to address each and every one of them. First, I want to just say, like, with the transhumanist stuff, like, if you, like, lose a limb, like, let's say you lose an arm like Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars, I think a lot of people would probably... I think it's understandable that you have people that would rather replace it with, like, a prosthetic arm that works just as well as another arm, rather than just having nothing but a stub replace your arm. Because if you get, like, an arm chopped off in an accident or something... Or if like an axe murderer like chops it off, but you survive the attack and you live on, but now you don't have an arm. In that scenario, I can understand wanting a prosthetic limb so that way you're not crippled, you're not like without like another arm. Now I know that prosthetic legs exist, but I don't know if we're at the point yet that prosthetic arms exist. So if people were suggesting that, then I can understand that. On the issue of longevity and, immortality, I personally would not want to be immortal because that would be depressing as fuck. Like, just, like, at the age of 26, I've already had so many people that I love or people that were close to me or people that I cared about die, and every time it happens, it just depresses the fuck out of me. Being immortal, having everybody that I care about, or yeah, everybody that I care about just die on me. Like my entire life, I just outlive everybody. That would make me, if not suicidal, ridiculously depressed. However, if somebody is has like a grand political plan, I could see why they would want to live longer, so that way they could like lead a country and map out exactly how they're supposed to be run, like they're playing a game of civilization where they control a society from its beginning to its end, or at least help guide it all the way, so that way they make sure that they're making the right decisions. Kind of like how Colonel Sanders made sure that his KFCs were sticking true to the true recipe. Now, with the issue of underpopulation in Western countries that are highly educated, I think that I agree with what the communists had said that I've talked to have said, that some of this stuff is economics. Like the crux of some of these issues is economics. Like a lot of people, including the working class, they don't have kids because a lot of people just can't afford to, or it would financially cripple them. You have a lot of bosses, they will pay themselves a shit ton of money, or like people that are like managers, high ranking positions, executive CEOs, they'll pay themselves most of the profit that most of the money that are profits from a company, but they'll pay like their average workers scraps. They'll hardly pay them anything, or they'll find ways to avoid paying them a living wage. And then when they say like, okay, I'll let you work for me, but you're not allowed to make more than $12 an hour. There are some places, like most places will give you a raise, but there are some companies that will, like the one that I'm currently working for, they say you're gonna make $16 an hour, nothing more. Or if nobody applies for that job, you get these business owners that go in online and bitch, or to reporters and whine, nobody wants to work anymore. And what I'm seeing lately is like a lot of news outlets, reporting the nobody wants to work anymore line, but it's recently been exposed. This has been an excuse that greedy business owners have been using since the 1800s. They'll say nobody wants to work anymore. Nobody wants, which is really just it's really just a code word for nobody wants to work for me because I'm paying like wages that are below the poverty line. So instead of paying people a fair amount of money that'll help them survive, I'm going to try to, basically make them slaves, but not run afoul of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, where a lot of business owners, they obey the letter of the law, but not the spirit of it. Now, I currently don't make enough money for myself to support myself. There's no fucking way in hell that I would be able to have a kid or raise or take care of a child on top of that. And multiple kids? Fuck no. I don't have enough money for that. And a lot of people don't have money for that. People in the middle class, a lot of them would struggle for that. People in the working class, we're fucked. I think a lot of these problems are economics. And you just get these wealthy people in this country, they got more money than they know what to do with, but they're not going to share it. So I think that I actually am starting to see the logic of class reductionists, and I do agree with a lot of what they say. And the more that I've been thinking about the things that people in default CMC's community, all these like Marxist-Leninist communities, they keep talking about things about the economic pressures and how this leads up to a lot of the problems that we're seeing, like problems like what we're talking about, the birth rates. I actually believe a lot of that's economic. I don't believe in class reductionism 100%, like that racism is 100% like rooted in economics. I do believe economics ties into it, but I do think that it's entirely possible that communism or socialism could potentially alleviate this. But the problem is, it's like a lot of communists tend to be hypocrites, because like the communist communities that have left, they were like, um, we believe in egalitarianism, but then they started like basically engaging in gynocentrism, where they'll promote women to high positions of power and they would discriminate in their favor. And anytime that communists would come across me, they would assume that I'm a tradcon, or they would treat me like shit. So it's like, if I want to
Yeah.
be, if I want to be in a community that agrees with me, I just got to go to the MRAs, because they're really the only people who can hang around without getting frustrated or have a bad experience. But at the same
Yeah.
time, at the same time, they're takes in class reductionism, or at the very least, the economic influences that are leading to the birth rate problem. I do agree with that stuff, as I just told you.
And of course, well, that's very interesting to have like a sort of communist or like Marxian analysis of that event. But if you're involved kind of in the spaces of the Manosphere, like with MGTOW or whatever, they would criticize that like no amount of socialism or communism would get over this birth rate problem, because the problem would be more about they're not going to disagree about there being economic considerations, but they'll disagree about how biology would fit into that, and how time preference might influence how women are going to choose when they want to start a family, and how men might, and how the government, and how certain economic policies put forth by the government might impede birth rate production. So for me, like, I think some of this comes out of I think that the left is having a hard time trying to reconcile a bunch of these contradictions that are involved with capitalism with the supposed analysis that they get from reading more leftist thinkers post-Marx. So for me, like, I was kind of a leftist at several points throughout my antinatalism, like, sort of story. But I became more dissatisfied and more disillusioned with leftist promises for communism and revolution. I think one of the books that I read that kind of changed my mind on that was Mark Fisher's Capitalist Realism. I don't know if you've heard of it or read it.
Not really. The only Marxist book that I've been I haven't
so
even read.
it's not that long of a book.
I've never even heard of it. I obviously don't have it.
I'd highly recommend it. It's only like 100 pages. It's very easy to read. It's very accessible. It's by philosopher Mark Fisher, and he was a student of Nick Land. And he pretty much thought that like capitalism is so entrenched in our ways of thinking about culture and what the future is. We're pretty much sifting through a bunch of dead futures. You can notice this in political discourse on the left. Like, let's say you had your revolution tomorrow, right? You're going to have this problem that I think V.I. Lenin noted, where like, are you going to have like a dictatorship of the proletariat or not? But you're also going to have this problem of how do you make a society post-capitalist without it just being capitalist still in a different name? Or how do you imagine what the future gets to be like without it succumbing to 1980s cyberpunk fiction? And the left does not know how to give an answer to that. And that made me disillusioned, because I thought they had an answer for a long time, but they really don't. It looks like continuous, unending protesting in the streets while still having to worry about paying rent and making sure that their wages are good enough, but not actually figuring out ways to live beyond that and to have it suit millions of people. So I'm kind of a fatalist or a pessimist when it comes to those sorts of projects. And that kind of catapulted me into right accelerationist / like anarcho-transhumanist spaces, heavily influenced by like the Austrian school and like libertarianism in certain degrees. And some of that might have been influenced by MGTOW as well. So in my mind, given that I don't think that a leftist project is viable or coherent in a philosophically meaningful sense, what is the best option? To me, the best option is you do the best you can as a man, and you gain enough resources so that you can at least live a life that is not in misery. And I think a lot of people are scared of doing that. and they want something bigger to believe in, so they still need these political ideologies that haven't really changed since the 1990s.
Okay, so so when I talked to these communists like Red Bonaparte back in June, a lot of the communists that I've communicated with, it's not their criticism of progressives, like the BLM, like people that took over that neighborhood in Seattle back in 2020, as well as the BLM rioters. They don't criticize them for like not winning over their purity tests. They criticize them because they're still capitalists. Like social democrats, they're still capitalists. They still believe in capitalism. Whereas like the communists that I've talked to, they want to overhaul the entire economic system and change it at its core, because we still have transaction, we still have profit being the eventual goal of like all of our transactions or all of our advocacy. Like they call the progressives and that variety of left, they call that the synthetic left, because number one, they're still capitalists. Number two, they are kind of puppets of people that are in power. And well, on the Democratic Party side, I mean, you mentioned a lot of stuff, so I'm just trying to remember everything else that you said, because I want to address everything that you said. What was
no problem. I said that due to the failures of like leftist or like communist theory. Yeah.
Yeah, now I remember what I was going to say. So the problem with that, it just seems a lot of people in the communist communities that I was in, or at least some of them, were supportive of the People's Republic of China, because they look at the People's Republic of China as, even though they're not really communist right now, they think, now I'm not a tanky, I'm not sympathetic to the PRC. I think that the People's Republic of China is a force of evil in the world. But I'm just saying what they believe in. They think that the People's Republic of China's end goal is to destroy capitalism. And what they're trying to take the torch that the Soviet Union dropped when they went into decline, they got really corrupt, and then they collapsed. The People's Republic of China's end goal is to destroy capitalism, and their tactic is to exploit its weak points. So the United States, our economy has always prospered more than that of the USSR, and that's always been accredited to our capitalism, our free market, our lack of protectionism. These are things that the People's Republic of China have exploited. For example, low-cost provider. The People's Republic of China, they create goods and they sell them for a much lower price than American manufacturers. American manufacturers can't compete because businesses in the United States, their goal is profit at the end of the day. So they're going to buy Chinese stuff because it's cheaper, and they're going to sell it even though it's utter crap, because they can make more money that way. And so now what they've basically done is they've put a lot of Americans out of work, and they're basically putting their balls in China's vice grip. And so what that does is it makes it so that China basically has leverage over us. So if you criticize, and also one thing that the People's Republic of China does is that they invest and do a lot of finance. If you criticize the People's Republic of China, something bad tends to happen to you. If you, like, it used to be like if the KGB didn't like you, they would just have you assassinated. With the People's Republic of China, there was a college called Emerson College where you had some students of TPUSA criticize the People's Republic of China, and then all of a sudden, Emerson College expelled them for criticizing the People's Republic of China. Very suspect. And that's not, like, those aren't the only examples, but even though I despise the People's Republic of China for their imperialism, I have to admit they're pretty smart, and they're pretty, I have a feeling that they're a lot smarter than our world leaders.
I usually don't participate in the is China communist or state capitalist discourse.
I know that it probably wouldn't matter to. Well, I don't want to speak for you. You can speak for yourself. But so like most Manosphereans, that shit doesn't matter. But the only reason why I was like interacting with that community was, number one, back when I was a teenager, I used to be an anarcho-communist, but it was more recently when I was interacting with them. But I think it was the main reason was because one of their leaders, Default CMC, debated Vosh, and I wanted to see if I could have a discussion with him. And well, he never had the courage to do that, so I just kind of like left their communities after having some bad experiences with some of their other members. But the reason why communists, to get back to the point, the reason why communists never can seem to create a communist society is a lot of them are hypocrites who don't believe in the stuff that they're saying. Because there was this one communist person who I've kind of distanced myself from, who claims to be a communist but seems to enjoy the concept of dictatorship and likes totalitarianism and authoritarianism. So it's like a lot of these people don't believe in this stuff that they pretend to advocate for, and it just frustrates me because like so many people, the problem is that communist societies or societies that try to be communist tend to get hijacked anytime that there is like anytime there's a top-down hierarchical power to be exploited. And you'll notice that these same people disparage groups like the EZLN because they're anarcho-communists. That was the reason why I was anarcho-communist, because it's harder to hijack when the power is evenly distributed, which in Marx's works was like what communism was supposed to be. It was not supposed to be this basically the kingdom of France, but we pretend to be communist kind of Soviet style of doing things. And it was a constant frustration. So it's like I can understand not really caring about the communist stuff, but it's like I always kind of thought that a lot of things that communists stood for was decent, like wanting to make sure that everybody had like a minimum standard of living and making sure that resources weren't being seized and hoarded by a select few group of privileged people while everybody else starves. So it's like there's some things that and the class reductionism to an extent I agree with. So I haven't 100% like distanced myself from like communist theory, but that's basically my experience. I don't know what you think. I'm curious.
Yeah, there's that's a very honest take, I think. I view, some people might hate my guts for this or whatever, but I view communism and socialism not really all that different from like a religion. Like they're saying that there's this promise that you can partake in if you just do the right thing, whatever the right thing supposedly is. And it's taken to a political economic dimension because they haven't been able to figure out what exactly this quote unquote right thing is in order to bring about the revolution. Because to me, it just, like I said, like it just looks like continuous protesting and being really angry about wages, but never actually being able to figure out how to live without wages. And even if we were to allow some means of automation, it would depreciate the value it depreciate human labor value because the machines can be more productive than people.
You also
yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
But yeah, like I also think that feeds into the birth rate problem still. And like I said, because I'm antinatalist, I'm all for there being as few people. Hell, 0 is cool, depending upon how we get there. And to me, like voluntarily choosing not to have children, I think is one of the better options than like global omnicide or war of all against all until everyone's dead, or an ecological collapse or something like that. I also think that we're at a time where a lot of our previous ideologies are being tested against the contradictions of how we even think about them or create them. Because like if we're not having children and stuff, why are we doing all this ideological Hegelian games, just trying to assert ourselves against each other when we're not even going to create, when it might not even be possible for a lot of people to create more of themselves through sexual reproduction anyway. There's a lot of frustration with the dating market and the supposed successes of the sexual revolution coming from the 1960s. That's rife amongst the manosphere, not just MGTOW, but incels, PUA, all that stuff. There's a lot of people that are quitting, they're dropping out. And believe it or not, I think China probably has the biggest sex doll market on the planet. And a bunch of these dudes, like, maybe I'm wrong here, whatever, but like, if you go down the MGTOW rabbit hole and you decide the sex doll route is a good option for you, China is going to supply that market. The only American markets are like real doll. To me, those are overpriced. Like, China has a good budget for even working class men that aren't going to have families.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll address the sex doll thing first, because I remember there was kind of like an exchange. Well, not really an exchange, but like the turd flinging monkey. I'm familiar with turd flinging monkey, and I've criticized him a couple of times on my YouTube channel, or my MGTOW.tv and BitChute channel. I'll just say my channel in general. He's a strong advocate for the sex doll. He's like, why do you need a relationship? Just go get a doll. And then there was another guy in the MGTOW community. I don't know if you've heard of him. Have you ever heard of a guy named LFA?
No.
LFA is a YouTuber that posts MGTOW content, and he's not a very well-known or particularly popular MGTOW user, but or MGTOW YouTuber, but he's out there. And for a while I was watching his content, but I kind of stopped watching it because all he ever talks about is like relationship advice and stuff along those lines. So it was just kind of weird to see him call himself MGTOW when that's like basically all of his posts. But he made a response to Turd Flinging Monkey's like sex doll advocacy, and he kind of echoes what I believe, or I'm basically echoing how he thinks, because he said this first. You'd probably, like, I don't see why you can't just like save $2,000 and just use your right hand. Like, basically all a sex doll is a masturbation aid. It's like, you could probably, if you just used like a plastic glove or something, you could save like $2,000. It just seems a little bit excessive, because, like, in my opinion, the preferable thing would be having like a real woman that you could trust. But if you can't have that, or don't trust any particular woman enough to do that with them, then you don't. I just kind of think that like a sex doll is silly unless you don't have an imagination.
I understand the criticism, but I think plenty of people have made responses to that sort of criticism, and really, it like I said, it comes down to values. Like, a dude that wants to get married and all that stuff probably isn't going to get a sex doll. But then again, you could buy a sex doll and do all the marriage stuff afterward if you want, even though I wouldn't recommend it. But it depends on how much you want to spend and what your time preference is. Like, there have been MGTOW videos that have gone and shown like the types of time and money you're going to have to put into attracting a partner. And that's going to vary upon like what you look like, how much money you make, and how much time you're willing to advocate. So let's say you're like average looking, but you want to get a well above average looking partner, you're going to have to go to the gym. There's pretty much no way around it. You either go to the gym, or you're going to have to get plastic surgery, or you're going to have to leave the country. And the gym, that's time. I mean, it's not just going to the gym either. I mean, you have to modify your nutrition. Mm-hmm. You might have to redo your entire schedule of how you manage work. You have to deal with perhaps being sore several days a week. But hey, if that's what you want, then so be it. I think what the point of the doll is, it's not supposed to be a substitute for a romantic partner with women. It's supposed to be like, I think of it like a happy middle ground between having an actual partner and, of course, just masturbation. Like, it feels different than masturbation. And like, I shared that Slavoj Žižek quote in the Discord with regards to men and women already want to see each other as some means of masturbation tools anyway. The doll is just like a quicker way around that, instead of having to engage in socially acceptable means of having a woman be your get off device. You have the doll there. And we also have to consider the United States has like the highest obesity rate on the planet, if not one of the highest, right? And if you're in an area where maybe you're an average dude or even an above average dude or even a well below average dude, whatever, and you can't, let's say the women around you, for the most part, like the ratio of above average looking or even average looking to women that are obese is like greatly tilted in favor of the obese.
Mm-hmm. So
the doll
basically,
looks better than them.
so
The
basically,
doll looks better than
Mississippi.
them.
So
I'm
basically, if
sorry,
you're,
what?
I'm sorry, I was gonna make a joke. I was about to say. So basically, if you live in Mississippi,
I mean, I don't even live in Mississippi, and I have
I
that
don't.
fucking problem with the chicks around here. I'm like,
Where I
good
don't.
lord. I don't want to say where I live at because it'd be
Okay.
too much of an issue, but it's
I
let's just
wasn't
say it's
gonna.
not good.
I was gonna ask what state, but if you don't want to share that information, I understand. I've already shared what state I live in multiple times, so I have no like I'm in like southern New Jersey, so it's like I just don't have that problem. Like there's lots of attractive women where I live. It's just a matter of screening them to make sure that they're not somebody that you wouldn't feel comfortable being in a relationship with.
Yeah, and that's the whole like problem with the whole like incel label, because how much of it is like involuntary versus men have mate preferences too.
Hmm.
Like I will never want to be with a fat chick, or if her face looks busted up or whatever. It's
Hmm.
just not going to happen. And if you're like that, the doll, like they're soft, their faces look great,
Hmm.
and their figures are fantastic. Um, a
Basically,
lot of
different courses for different horses. Like I when it comes to stuff like this, I have a live and let live attitude. The only thing that I would criticize is I don't really want people giving China money because I consider them to be the People's Republic of China. Taiwan's different. I consider the PRC and Russia to be my geopolitical enemies. So the idea of giving them money just kind of just um it rubs me the wrong way. But I also know that at a systemic level, we're financially dependent on them. And the only thing that's actually changing that is China shutting down their factories due to COVID-19, which is forcing businesses in the United States to stop buying their shit. And it frustrates me that we had to rely on China shooting themselves in the foot in order for us to, stop making ourselves financially dependent on them. It's like the capitalists, like us hyper capitalists, were like, no, please, China, put the leash back on us, put the chastity device back on us. And they're like, no, 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 we gotta stop ourselves. It's like, I can't decide if this is frustrating or hilarious. Like, if I was a nihilist, I would be laughing, but me actually caring about the well being of the United States, I'm just frustrated.
yeah, and um, I get that the dolls, like it's men, it's majority men that buy the dolls and like to penetrate them and everything. But
I
there's like
don't
a huge, yeah,
I don't judge either sex doing it.
yeah, but it's more looked down upon and looked at as like rapey or necrophiliac based. Usually
Mm-hmm.
that's the criticism against those types of against doll owners or whatever.
Or no, they'll look at you as basically being a loser that can't get with like a real woman, etc., or something along those lines. It drives me like that tradcon shit just drives me up the wall. And I just want our society to be more accepting of people that are into different things. Even though I'm in like right wing spheres, like I've never liked homophobes, I've never liked transphobes, I never liked people that judged people's, yes, or no, wait, I can't say never because when I was a child, growing up in the Catholic Church, I was in a very judgmental sphere, and I was very judgmental as a child. The thing that changed my mentality was somebody just telling me like, why does it matter to you if homosexuals are allowed to marry each other? How does it negatively affect you? That's all it really took for me to like really introspect and reflect on this and change my worldview. That was around like 2013, I think, when I made that turnaround. Because before that, I was like indoctrinated to be very bigoted against anybody that was different from me, and I kind of needed just somebody to make that comment to help snap me out of it, get the wool over my eyes. I wanted to also address the other things that you mentioned because you like mentioned a whole bunch of things, not just the sex dolls. I forgot what they were already.
Yeah, no problem. I know I mentioned China and like further exacerbations of the birth rate problem and issues of communist revolution never coming to fruition because of capitalist realism. Um,
I think we covered all that pretty much.
some means of accelerationism and Austrian school.
So accelerationism. Now I know that like a lot of people lately have been using the word accelerationism. Yeah, have been using the word accelerationism to refer to like accelerating and worsening race relations in order to get the race war really going. Like Richard Spencer voting for Joe Biden, thinking that it's gonna make race relations worse and accelerate the likelihood of a race war, which I could see as logic because like the Democrat Party is a very racist party because they are black supremacists. They hate white people. And you see this all the time in like progressive communities, their hatred towards white people. Um, I've always thought of accelerationism being I've always known it as being a Marxist concept where it was like I think I've read this quote out of context, not in its full context, but I remember reading a quote by Karl Marx somewhere on the internet saying that he is nominally against free trade, but that the only context he would be in favor of free trade was that it breaks up all the old nationalities and it worsens conditions for the proletariat, the workers, the downtrodden. That free trade will make life better for the wealthy and the people that own the means of production, and it'll make life worse for the people that are the workers. It will make things worse, and that free trade will it'll get things to the point where things are so bad, like the French Revolution, that it'll make people angry to the breaking point that people are so mad that they snap and then they have a revolution and then we get our communism. He said that that would be the only context that he would vote for free trade. That was my understanding of accelerationism. I don't know if that's what you were talking about or if you were talking about something different.
Yeah, that's where a lot of people think of where thinkers like Deleuze and Guattari get accelerationism from. I think from that little quote of Capital that I think you gave. But I pulled up Anti-Oedipus here, and here's like where. Oh shit. But yeah, here's pretty much what they have. This is what Deleuze and Guattari I think say on accelerationism, thinking from that still like deterritorialization, reterritorialization, territorialization framework of how capital moves people and how certain entities such as land, identity, and culture become uprooted through that process of capital, like you were saying, and they might become like nomadic workers or in the advent of the 1980s, we see like these free trade programs that like went and outsourced a bunch of the work from factories, and now it caused a lot of economic problems for people in Middle America. But here's what Deleuze and Guattari I think have to say on that. Hold on, let me pull it up. All right, they say, for perhaps the flows are not yet deterritorialized enough, not decoded enough, from the viewpoint of a theory and a practice of highly schizophrenic character, not to withdraw from the process, but to go further or to accelerate the process. As Nietzsche put it, in this matter, the truth is that we haven't seen anything yet. Okay. So accelerationism is this ability for capital to deterritorialize and reterritorialize certain cultural and economic spaces. And in this deterritorialization and reterritorialization, you're going to see like a shifting or like a schizophrenic sort of politics. That's what I think we're saying online with a lot of like the doxing and all this stuff. All this stuff as well.
That reminds me about the doxing thing. Like, it seems like we all know about like white supremacist terrorists, but it's also you do also see like left wing and liberal terrorism. In the county committee that I'm in, we have had members have their cars like had eggs thrown at them. You know, people have had their property vandalized. We've had, you know, conservatives or people that are in the right wing spectrum have threats against them. I had a men going their own way wiki that suspiciously got taken down. I don't know if that was Wikia taking it down because they didn't like what I was posting on there, or if people from Rational Wiki went out and like hacked it. Um, so you do have what some people call the synthetic left doing stuff like that, just as well. I mean, it's not just like doing vandalism and like the chilling effect, like what I mentioned, but you do also have Antifa terrorism. You have them doing rioting, looting. They pretend to care about minorities while they burn down their small businesses, saying that they stand for the proletariat, but then they screw over like these destitute minorities who are just doing what they can to make a living and trying to make it in this country. That was one of the things that really turned me off from leftism, was seeing the contempt for the small business owner, and like they want to destroy like poor people's attempts at, you know, making it in this country. They want to destroy small businesses, and then they just expect those people to join the revolution. It's like, no. And I find that reprehensible. And I'm proletariat. Oh yeah, you're gonna call me a class traitor? You're gonna line me up against a wall and shoot me for not agreeing with your degenerate ideas? All right, fine. Um, there was other things that you mentioned that I wanted to talk about earlier, because you said a bunch of stuff and then you said something about sex dolls. I wanted to address the stuff that you said before then, but that last point just kind of like caught my attention. So
Was it the supposed disillusionment in dating, like perhaps putting forth more attention towards sex dolls or normalizing it or whatever?
I think the other thing that I wanted to address, it may have been just very quick, just the power and control that is associated with interpersonal relationships. I mean, you get the female supremacists. They don't like single men are a threat in that they are men that are not being controlled, and the only way you can control them is via the government. Because like female supremacists, like domestic abusers, their ability to control a person is usually via like an interpersonal relationship. So it's just an extra layer of protection if you're not in a relationship with that person. So then they have to do other things. They have to, you know, have like gynocentrists taking power in the workplace, or it might be the government. They'll try to get into government positions, or they'll lobby the government to pass laws in their favor or discriminate in their favor. And I think the frustration that I had with men going their own way, aside from just them not really agreeing with my philosophy, it's just like you're just gonna sit on your hands and let them just basically just walk into office unopposed, and then they start passing laws and they have access to the government's power, and we're just gonna run off in the woods thinking that we're safe because the government's got drones, they've got satellite imagery. They were able to take on Al Qaeda and the Taliban, and the Taliban and Al Qaeda are way better equipped and organized than men going their own way are. Like these female supremacists, if they had their way, we would both of us would be enslaved. But you know, just going the Ted Kaczynski route ain't gonna work in our favor. I'm not saying that men going their own way need to stop like advocating for the good stuff that the good work that they do, where they advocate for, you know, a good lifestyle and self-preservation. I'm still in favor of that stuff, but you know the just kind of checking out of society is, it just seems to me like you're basically just giving our enemies, you're basically taking away their potential opposition from getting in office, because it's not like they can't be opposed when it comes to running for offices and doing political activism. They're not invincible in that regard. They do things like pull fire alarms if you have a public event that you announce and It's not at a place where you have control to prevent them from doing stuff like that. But form like militia groups like the Proud Boys and have them guard places like fire alarms so that way no one can get through or stuff of that nature. Because like the Proud Boys, they organize. Conservatives, they organize. They these so many other political groups are so much better at organizing, and I feel like men's rights activists and the manosphere in general tend to let too much shit slide, and that just always drove me up the wall. It's like, man, why can't we be like as organized as the commies? They know how to fucking like organize shit, and we don't.
I think that a part of this just kind of goes toward TFM's supposed solutions to fight what's going on with gynocentrism and why he's still resigned to MGTOW. His solutions were you either take away women's rights or you're going to have to invent like artificial wombs, pretty much.
Well, see, this is, I don't know if you are aware of the, I think, did I mention this earlier that I'm not a fan of TFM? I mean, I was watching his videos for a while years ago. I don't remember how long ago this was. It's probably, I don't remember when I made that video that I made criticizing him the first time around. It was before he deleted most of his videos on YouTube. He's a tradcon and I'm an egalitarian, so he and I are just already not going to see eye to eye. But even with that being said, when it comes to the government, he seems to, I don't want to put words in his mouth because that wouldn't be right, obviously. But he kind of strikes me as a tradcon who wants, I will say what he has said for sure. He's called for a soft patriarchy, which I think we've already seen that doesn't really work. It's like, listen, it didn't work the first time around. Why do you think it's going to suddenly work now? Like, what we need to do is we need to take power over the government that has so much power. Like, the FBI, the military, the guard, the National Guard, State Guard, state militias. They have so much power, but it's almost kind of like it's kind of like a game of capture the, what's it called? King of the Hill. It's like, yeah, the government's the hill, but it's not exclusive to female supremacists and feminazis and gynocentrists. We can take the hill. We have to try, and you have to organize.
All right, so how do you, like, who gets to take the hill exactly? Will there be women that take the hill? Or is there going to be men that take the hill?
I mean, that's basically what I'm saying, but also, like, you also look at these social media companies where, like, idiots like Xander Hall on YouTube claim, oh, well, they have an agenda of making money, even though they make a lot of decisions that don't necessarily make the money. The go woke, go broke thing. What I see happening a lot is these progressive, synthetic left libtards. They go into these universities, and I know because I know people who have gone to these universities, and then they come out with bachelor's degrees or master's degrees. They take over social media companies, and then they start banning people who have, like, not just like conservative politics, but people in the manosphere, because we're a threat to female supremacy. And that drives me up the wall.
Yeah, but how would you get rid of female supremacy or the current, like, reign of gynocentrism now? Like, what would that involve?
Well, it would involve two things. Like, number one, it's like the unfortunate reality seems to be is that if you want a living wage, or if you want a decent office job where you don't have to deal with dangerous people in a working class environment, if you want power in tech companies, if you want to get in an office, you'll have to for some of these things, you'll have to go to a 4-year school in order to get a degree that opens doors for you to get into a company where you can make a living wage. And then you also have to, well, you don't have, these are not mutually inclusive, but you also need to, like, run for offices to try to get positions of power, but also be smart about it. You just, if the Republican Party is strong in your state, then you would probably run as a Democrat and see if there's vacancies. Because I live in a state where the Democratic Party is the most powerful political party. And, when you go in, you just kind of have to send feelers, get a feel for what the power dynamic is, who's in power. It's like,
Well,
okay, so
how long is that gonna take?
who knows how long it'll take. But you can't
All right,
listen.
so TFM already pretty much solved it. And in his worldview, like if you just take away women's rights, a lot of this stuff would already be solved, so you wouldn't have to do a lot of that. That's how he's going to think about it.
Oh,
Or you
yes.
have an artificial womb so that like men could have more reproductive control over what gets to go on and what types of biocapital gets to be created.
He just
relying upon the state.
he says things like that, like, oh, just take women's rights away. How do you plan on doing that? Do you think
That's a good question too. I've thought about that as well.
because
And to me, like the only means of doing that, you're going to have a paramilitary, or you're going to have to look like the Amish in some way. And I don't view that as I don't view either of those options as being politically like feasible. Like
Considering-
if you live in a city, you're not going to go and live like the Amish because you're operating under different economic conditions.
Not to mention that the other option that you mentioned, the paramilitary seizing the government, it's like, didn't Trump supporters try doing that in January of 2021? Granted, it wasn't very organized and it was very chaotic. The police basically just let them into the White House because there's video footage showing the police not just like opening the barriers and saying, hey, let's just come in, just invade, but also they were taking selfies with the Trumpian militias that, these were people that were armed. They stormed in. They were going to destroy documents. They were carrying Confederate battle flags and Trump flags. They had a fake noose that they were threatening to hang Mike Pence with. Like, this was like the Trump supporters and the QAnoners were actually trying to do the thing. Maybe not like what TFM was calling for, but that's up for debate. But they tried and they failed miserably. So it's like the idea that you're just going to say like, oh, well, just take women's rights away. First of all, I'm not necessarily in favor of that. At least not completely, because I'm an egalitarian. But it just seems it's like
and
it's easier said
about TFM.
It's easier said than done. And that's not even what I'm calling for. I'm just calling for men to have rights, basically. But what I'm like,
I can see that.
What I'm calling for is essentially a long-term plan, because the fact of the matter is that in a republic like ours, you need to accept the political landscape that we have and try to work within the system, because a lot of people that had political success did this. Donald Trump, a lot of people think of him as a mover and shaker, but in reality, what he was calling for and doing was really no different from what Republicans already believed and advocated for. Because what did he do once he got in office? He basically fulfilled the wishes of the GOP. Now, that's not probably the best example, but if you want like long-term solutions, we're gonna have to basically like take over the GOP and the Democratic parties. Almost, I don't like to use this example, but basically like a blight or a creeping vine, where we just kind of just take them over and get power that way.
How dependent upon birth rates are you in order for this entire political plan to occur?
It's not as dependent on birth rates as it is on proselytizing. Like, how many people can we sway over to our side, basically? That's my strategy. Because the fact of the matter is, it's like, oh, we don't have enough people. There's plenty of people coming in from Mexico and India. It's like, India has more people than they know what to do with. People's Republic of China has a large population. It's like, just a matter of moving people around. And I'm not saying...
So you'd be dependent upon immigration in order for this to happen, then?
I don't have a problem with immigration. Now, here's the thing about immigration. I'm not... When it comes to the tests that we use on people who come in, I'm less in favor of an intelligence test barring people than I am in favor of a loyalty test. If we should have a screening process that doesn't necessarily test people's intelligence, because they're native... There are Americans who were born and raised here who are fucking dumb as shit, and they're allowed to stay here. But immigrants that come in, they have to pass this ridiculously vigorous intelligence test. what I would make vigorous and what I would make vigorous would be a loyalty test, and I would not make the questions the test super obvious what it's asking for, but I would kind of like prod the person taking the test brain to make sure that they're not like a saboteur who's coming in to do sabotage on the United States, or somebody that wants to somebody like let's say you get somebody who's immigrating from Bihar, India, and they what they want to do, they're basically saying, hey, you know what, in Bihar, India, we kidnap boys and force them to marry girls at gunpoint. We should do that here in the United States, and that's why I'm going to convince as many people as possible to move into the United States, into a specific region of the United States. That way, we could basically just do what Albania did to Serbia, where we just moved a bunch of people into Kosovo and then broke them away and then became their own country. We're going to do that, and except we're going to legalize like child marriage and forced marriage and shit like that. Basically, I would have a loyalty test that would basically specifically screen people like that out. But aside from that, I'm not against immigration.
Yeah, I think that another question that probably needs to be asked, of course, is do you think that decline in patriarchy has largely been beneficial, or do you think that it's been more overall a negative?
I'm not really sure how I feel about that, because on the one hand, I feel like there was pros and cons to it. The biggest con was just instead of having a patriarchy, I feel like now we're having like an incredibly gynocentric society. I mean, it was gynocentric before the patriarchy fell, but now it's just like female supremacist. So it's like I didn't like either one. I'm an egalitarian. It seems like the power struggle is between male supremacists and female supremacists, and I don't like either group. So I have if I lived before like the 1960s, probably I probably would have still been unhappy with the situation, but just for different reasons. I mean, it's not like men were not absolved of responsibility or, strings attached back before the patriarchy fell. So either way, I would have been unhappy, because I'm more of someone who just doesn't want any strings to hold me down.
So, like, if we're supposed to believe, I don't know what side of the discourse would believe this the most, but either feminists or Manospherians or whichever side, like, supposedly in the past, men had a lot more power over everything than women. Why was there an event in the past in which that declined?
That's exactly
how did that occur?
See, this is my point. This is why I don't buy the TFM point of, oh, we just need to take women's rights away and have a soft patriarchy again. It's like the fact that we're at the point that we're at shows that failed. It's kind of like communists who don't want to accept that the Soviet Union failed. It's like you get some of them that say, well, the reason why the Soviet Union had to turn into a totalitarian hellhole is because America continued to exist. Stalin, he wanted to let the gays live, but then America existed, so then he just had to send them to gulags. It's like, okay, well, that just proves that your ideology failed. You say, soft patriarchy is the answer, taking women's rights are the answer. Well, that already existed, and it failed. So it's like, I'm not convinced that it's the answer. So, I basically agree with what you're saying. I don't think there's too much disagreement here. I mean, aside from
I'm not an egalitarian, but I think that patriarchy is not inherently evil or bad. I think it's another way of having society compared to what weird countries are doing. And there are certain areas on the planet that are still more patriarchal than what we're doing.
Well, what we have right now is gynocentrism, and I'm not happy with. I've already said that I'm not happy with either one. My goal is an egalitarian society, but the feminists don't seem to be very honest about it. They're kind of like the Soviets in that they would say one thing and then they would do something else. They claim to want equality, but my discussion that I had with Vosh proved to me, because Vosh is an influencer in the progressive sphere, And feminists tend to do what he does, where they say, like, well, feminism tries to address inequality and we're egalitarians and we want equality. By the way, men in Western societies are privileged and women in Western societies are oppressed, but I can't prove this argument. So I'm just going to point to the fact that women who are historically oppressed, or I'll just point to the wage gap. And if anybody proves me wrong, then I'll silence their speech. So that way I look like I'm right.
Yeah, and I also have to add that TFM, he recognizes that taking women's rights away is not a politically or economically popular point of view, which is why he kind of backed off of it a little bit. I think that he still thinks that it's correct, or that he's right as like a solution to deal with gynocentrism as it is now, to go to that soft patriarchy. But of course, he has like this whole like diagram about soft patriarchy, hard patriarchy, and gynocentrism, and how it cycles into that and everything.
Well, yeah, I know about. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
But yeah, I think he knows that, like, in a very, very politically pragmatic sense, you could make the case that that would solve the problems, but it starts to collapse when you start to think about the details of what that implies and how you would implement something like that.
Well, yeah, and also that actually brings me to a point that, like, you know, you could talk. It's best to like work these ideas out. I understand the temptation of like thinking out loud like that, even though I don't agree with him. Saying something like that openly is just gonna create unnecessary trouble for yourself, because it's a very radical, or at least in our accepted political discourse by the powers that be in Western societies, that's a very controversial political position to have. It's one of those things that you never talk about, you just do it once you get in office. It's like if I send feelers out there and I find out that a political position that I have is unpopular, I'll just kind of keep that to myself, do a Palpatine where it's like, I'll make that the surprise once I take power, but I'm not going to ever talk about it beforehand, because I know that I'm going to get shit for it. Because I remember one of the Vosh videos that Vosh posted back about tankies. He was telling tankies that the reason why, the thing that turns people off to leftism is see them like openly like cherish the Soviet Union and authoritarianism. And he's like, do you know why Nazis have been so successful lately? And he said, and I kind of agree with him on this, it's because they stopped putting on the fucking armband, and now they're portraying themselves as Christian nationalists. They're not goose-stepping out in public anymore. You don't see the swastika tattooed all over them. Now they're dressing as clean-cut men wearing suits and ties like Richard Spencer and Nick Fuentes, because seeing extremist symbols is a major turnoff to those ideologies. Because every time they go out and like declare, you know, do what Nick Fuentes does now, where he just says the N-word every 5 seconds on a show, they get shit on for it. People like Nick Fuentes, he used to be the optics guy, and now but ever since he got open about his neo-Nazism, he got banned off of every platform on the internet, and every bank boycotted him. He can't support himself anymore, and now he's living with his mother. And he's basically shit out of luck in his life. It's like, if you want to if you not only want to be politically successful, but also survive, if you have a controversial political position or a political plan that's very controversial that could end you, you're going to have to pull like a Palpatine from Star Wars, where that becomes the surprise once you're already in office. But if you show your power level beforehand, you're the mole in a game of whack-a-mole, and you basically just popped your head up. So that way you could get whacked in the head. So I'm curious to know what your reaction to that is, but I do kind of want to wrap this up because we went on like an hour longer than I intended, because I still have work tomorrow and all. So
of course. I understand that, like, part of politics is being Machiavellian and trying to like not show your hand to other people and everything, but I think what TFM wanted, he just wanted to be honest, and was just like, if we keep going like this, I mean, even he said himself, like, feminism's not going to last forever, gynocentrism is not going to last forever because it's economically impossible or socially impossible, because once a collapse occurs, men are the ones that seize power and women are the ones that usually don't put up much of a fight, because it becomes that Hobbesian war of all against all, where there is no crime in war if that sort of a collapse were to occur. So, yeah.
Well, that was like the fall of the Western Roman Empire. I've heard that it was because like laws start like basically white knights started passing laws giving women more rights than men, or women could just say, "Oh, you know, he's not the husband." They could basically just take everything in a no-fault divorce, and then the barbarians take him out. And that some people were saying that that's what it is with like the Muslim Chads basically going to be the ones that the Western women spread their legs open for in order to betray like Western men. And now basically I'm like, well, at least Muslim men will give Western men an offer to join them, because you know these Muslims, they want us to convert to their religion. They want us to convert and join them. They don't want us to be left out. So at least there's that silver lining with this group of invaders. I don't mean that to make me sound like an alt-righter, but it's like that's something that I've always thought about when I just see the alt-right discourse in politics regarding like all of that stuff. Now, they never said that, but I'm thinking like, well, at least the Muslim men are polite enough to give us Western men a way out of it, you know. But as for like when it comes to politics that are controversial, if you want people to get on board with what you're advocating for, you have to talk in dog. You kind of have to talk in dog whistles and like slowly move them to that point.
It's a lot of coded language, and it's a way of making your message known to your family or to your allies, so that your enemies don't know. But,
yeah.
With regards to like egalitarianism, there's this position in bioethics that comes out of like further advances in potentially thinking about artificial wombs. I think it's called ectogenetic egalitarianism, which like second wave feminists have like one of the second wave feminists that considered this position was Shulamith Firestone, I think. And the idea, like TFM pretty much ran with that idea for MGTOW as a way of trying to unshackle the state's oppression of men with regards to like gynocentric family courts and everything, which would mean that like if you were able to make artificial wombs, then like men wouldn't have to go through the say-so of women necessarily in order to make their own progeny. But of course, there's technological problems with that, and some people call that a form of eugenics. So if feminism is supposed to be in favor of egalitarianism, would they be in favor of that, or would they not be in favor of that? And also, like, how would the artificial wombs be made, and whose eggs and whose sperm would be used? Of course, you got to have that discussion, but let's say we put all that aside. Would you be in favor of, like, that form of egalitarianism where sexual reproduction doesn't really occur anymore, and now it's the product of something outside of a woman's body that a man can control? Or do you think that, like, we shouldn't have that means of sexual segregation, and that men and women should have to still work together in society because you think that it might be better than the alternative or whatever?
So when it comes to like people who call themselves feminists, like I said in my discussion with Vosh, I don't like to make sweeping generalizations of people, because there are people who call themselves feminists who are genuine, well-meaning egalitarians. They're not the ones who I would level this criticism at. The ones that I despise are the hypocrites, the ones who claim that they're feminists, they claim that they believe in equality, but in reality, that's really just a front to justify being female supremacists, but in disguise. And then you have just overt female supremacists who utilize the label of feminist in order to justify what they're doing, because calling themselves female supremacists would not be very smart optics-wise. The female supremacists would be absolutely against it, because they're against men having any rights or any autonomy. If they had their way, all men would basically just be enslaved. But feminists who are egalitarians, they wouldn't have a problem with that. It really depends on which ones you're dealing with, or which ones you're asking about. I feel like I kind of already know the answers because I've seen so much shit online and I've seen so much stuff in person that it's like I already know what their position is already going to be because I've seen their opinions on these issues a lot. Trans exclusionary radical feminists is another group that I just lump in with female supremacists because they pretty much have the same positions. Because before the gender critical subreddit got taken down, it was basically like they had the same exact positions as female dating strategy. The only real difference is that female dating strategy was obsessed with enslaving and controlling men, whereas gender critical was primarily focused on hating trans people. But aside from that, they were essentially the same.
Indeed, indeed. And one last thing I think we should probably talk about would be like the perception of male violence and how both parties want to they want to utilize male violence usually against men for their own political purposes. And one example of this would be feminism still wanting to have men be the ones that give up their paychecks or have the state pretty much garnish a bunch of their paychecks in favor of child support and alimony under the threat of some supposed violence. Like, it's not supposed, it happens under threat of imprisonment or further fines or not being able to visit your children in the event of a divorce. Yeah. And one of the things that happens in that discourse is like, I think a lot of this discourse is some sort of like jealousy about how a feminist may say they're scared of male violence when it's in domestic violence, but they're not afraid of male violence when it supports those gynocentric ends.
That's because those are the female supremacists and hypocrites that I was referring to earlier.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll say 1 minute, I don't even know if these are even the same people, but you can go online and you'll see entire communities of this stuff where they say they hate the state, but they need the state. Like, they need the state in order to garnish male tax dollars in order to have the system still running. Because if it were up to millions of men, they wouldn't be paying taxes.
I mean, I don't know how much experience you've had in the political sphere. You said that you got started in 2017 was when you started going down the rabbit hole of online politics. I started, I think, in technically 2012, but I didn't really go that deep until 2014. But, 3 years, I'm not sure. I guess those 3 years extra were, probably helped me get to this point where it's like nothing really surprises me anymore. The quote feminists unquote that you're referring to are really just female supremacists that know better to talk in dog whistles. Otherwise, they'll end up like the gender critical subreddit where they get banned outright. Now they got banned for transphobia primarily, but their goal is to fool as many people as possible because they know that if they do what they did in 2016 and prior to 2016, where they basically just openly said, yeah, we want men to be enslaved, we don't want them to have any rights, blah, 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 because that resulted in people like Donald Trump getting elected. And GamerGate was a time period, not just like the actual issue itself, but that was a whole time period where we suddenly saw a massive shift to the right. So many people on the left, including myself, shifted towards the right. So now they basically learned, they took a page out of the neo-Nazi playbook where they now talk in dog whistles. You know why, like, you hear dog whistles like tough on crime and stuff of that nature? Because if you just straight up say, hey, we need to have more black people working for free in prison, you're going to get your windows smashed in. Someone might take you out. Whereas, like, if you say, we need to be tough on crime and we need to lock up all those potheads and teach them how to be correct in our society, that's going to look more respectable. You know what I mean?
Of course. And I think that some of that hatred, like, part of that jealousy that I mentioned, I think it comes out when, if you're a man and you say you have like a sex doll or whatever, like, they absolutely hate it because that's your attention's not on them. Your attention's on the sex doll for your sexual purposes. So they can't use sexual politics as a means to get what they want, which is why, like, I remember this one post when I was a moderator on the Antinatalism Reddit. It was like in reference to the Roe v. Wade decision that just happened. And one of the commenters was like, women should go on a sex strike. And then I commented back. I was like, you guys are gonna have to come up with something else because we have sex dolls. So like, where's your power at?
So
Why would you go?
So basically, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I hope that this kind of answers your questions. It seems like she probably interpreted what you're saying as like being opposed, because people, when they get really upset about stuff like this, they tend to be very paranoid, and they probably assumed that you were like, again, that you were in favor of the Roe v. Wade ruling. But the reason why, like, the reason why female supremacists want to take away like sex dolls and reproductive rights for men, it's not jealousy, it's power, it's abusive power and control. It's all about controlling.
I think it's jealousy because they view men as doing that to them already. So it's like it's a payback time thing. That's what I mean by jealousy or resentment.
I'm not saying it can't be that. I think it's that too, but I'm taking a more consequentialist approach where I look at what they're doing and looking at the results of their rhetoric and seeing the effects that it has. It's like, sure, you could, like, who knows what their intentions are? I'm not a mind reader. I can't read minds, but I look at the effects of their actions and I look at the effects of their advocacy and I judge their character based on that. Because if you do that, you will, if anyone cares about what you think of them, they will modify their behavior to make sure that they don't do that. And if they don't, then it validates the notion that they're doing it for power and control, because functionally that is the case.
Yeah, and just like this whole idea that like we should use sex as a means of politics against men, I find it repugnant, and I don't think it's going to go the way that people that want that politics to go. I think that because there are differing sexual technologies and more men already doing the math about what's happening economically and what's happening in the sexual marketplace, they're already disillusioned. Like, they're telling a bunch of men, like, you're not going to be able to sleep with me. But get this, they also tell men that you're a bunch of rapists. So it's like, if you can just rape, why, like, what point is the sex strike? Like, the narrative doesn't make sense and stuff. Like, what is going on here? But putting the rape aside, even if you just have the sex dolls and everything, it's like, if you're already disillusioned with the sexual marketplace, you're telling an already dehydrated person that's already pretty much not getting water, like, we're not going to give you water. And it's like, well, okay. But I don't think it should be that drastic, because I don't think you're going to die due to absence of sex. And I think a bunch of over-sexualization in society forces these sort of antagonisms and hatred, even self-hatred, like men hating themselves because they can't get sexual relations with women, even though, like, they could if they really wanted to, but they just might not. They're like, for several reasons, they might not want to, because the market might not be in their favor because of they might be obese, or like you said, you have your own screening measures. Like, every man has his own screening measures, right? That's why I'm very critical of the term incel. It's like, what does that mean? Like, I won't fuck fat chicks, so it's involuntary.
Well, when I hear incel, usually I interpret that as like, it's not just guys who are like this. I've seen women who are just the same. They are people who blame their inability to get sex or relationships on extrinsic factors. And on BitChute, there was like this one nutcase who has been trying to flame me nonstop. He's like, no, you don't get it, bro. Like, inceldom is like the true manosphere, and we can't get laid because it's not our fault, it's everybody else's fault, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, just shut the fuck up. Like, you know, I actually, when I, I'm sorry, in the men's rights community, I actually got a lot of, I had a couple MRAs actually get real mad at me for even talking about incels when I was talking to that Marxist guy, Red Bonaparte, a couple months ago. They were like, you shouldn't be giving any lip service to the existence of incels because they some of these guys are a little bit conspiratorial. I don't know if what they're saying is true. They said that the existence of incels is like a COINTELPRO like false flag operation by the FBI or some shit like that. And it's like I don't know if that's true, but you know, it's like entitled people can exist. Okay, that's not that far fetched, but it's like.
And if you go down the incel rabbit hole enough, like incels themselves put forth probable solutions for men that go through inceldom. Like I said, that could range anywhere from geomaxing to plastic surgery to going to the gym. What they have their own solutions for it.
Well, yeah, that's what's great about. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to get out. Like, it's great. We're actually, when it comes to solving inceldom, I think we're in the best point in history because you can, if you don't like your physical appearance, you can get, you know, plastic surgery now. That exists now. There was a time when that didn't exist. You can work on your physical appearance. You can choose what profession you want. There was a point in history you couldn't do any of that. The only thing that incels regret, that some of these incels regret that they can't like force, like have arranged or forced marriages, but it's like, okay, well that can work against you too. It's a two-way street. What if you get hooked? What if like you're in India and like you have to, and you're like some girl's like father, and this girl, let's say you have some fat chick whose father is holding you at gunpoint, say that they're going to shoot you if you don't marry her. Forced marriages and all isn't forced and arranged marriages aren't so great all of a sudden. But the only reason why I even talked about incels with that Marxist guy in the first place is I just wanted to, number one, I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit to kind of get out my opinion, but I also wanted to set the record straight on what my position on that issue was, because when I was interacting in like some incel communities, people assume that I was an incel because they see my username and avatar. And I just kind of wanted to post a video for everybody to see so I could set the record straight on what my position was.
Yeah, they probably thought that you were like some resentful, like sex-starved dude who's gonna like hang himself in like 2 weeks. That's probably what they fucking thought. But I don't think you have to necessarily think of yourself in that way. And there's this guy named that guy Pete who you refused to invite to gatherings on YouTube. He goes through all of this stuff about male suicide, the sexual marketplace, ethics. He talks about all of this. And just a quick note, my mentioning of the ectogenetic egalitarianism, that comes from this philosopher named Mati Hairi. I think he's an antinatalist, but I'm currently watching his episode on the Exploring Antinatalism podcast. And I think he came up with that term. So I didn't come up with that term, but he came up with that one. And
well, I know that
yeah.
I know that you didn't come up with antinatalism because I've seen it long before seeing anything from you.
Yeah, of course.
But you know, it's one of those things. I do kind of want to wrap this up soon because I'm supposed to. I need to get to work relatively early tomorrow. We could continue this on the weekend, but it's like right now I'm recording this with what's it called? Fuck, I don't even remember what capture software I'm recording this with, but it's gonna take a long ass time for it to finish processing once we're done here. So.
All right. Well, I won't hold you too much longer. So we can go ahead and wrap this up. We're having a pretty good discussion. So this is quite awesome.
I do agree with that. If you have any like other topics that you want to cover, like I recommend jotting them down so that way if we do another one of these discussions, that way you remember exactly what you want to say. I didn't come on here with a script. I didn't really need to because I think this was originally your idea, but I'm always open to doing discussions like this because I like doing discussions like this that are really productive. The only discussions I don't like doing is when somebody wants to come onto my Discord so that way they could just yell at me for not being a tanky supporting because I don't support Vladimir Putin or because I don't like believe in the incel struggle. Those people I'm not going to bother platforming. But you had an interesting political background of antinatalism that I was kind of curious about. So, and this was a very good discussion. It didn't devolve into like insults or me needing to like figuring out or me needing to prove that the person I'm arguing with is a liar, like some other people I've talked to. So I appreciate that.
Totally, totally. I think that more of this should be encouraged on online, especially given the current environment and just for all parties involved. If we want to try to at least understand certain claims as being true or false, we're going to have to take that sort of risk in engaging with ideas that we might find to be unpalatable.
I agree. All right. I gotta go now. Good night.
All right, see ya.